Can you hear me? Air Chief Marshal Tipnis, Senior Veterans, DG8, Air Marshal Anil Chopra. Indeed, a great pleasure. Grateful to CAPS for having invited me to talk here on a topic which is, well, it's been under discussion ever since we got independent, so 75 years. Quite obviously, there's something that needs to be done. But I must straight off admit that a lot has been done, but obviously we haven't reached where we want to be. What I'll do is I'll just give you a couple of examples, and then I'll come down to what my view is on what more should we do. And let me start off by this. People of my generation earlier would remember the HC-2, a great aircraft to fly, of course, till it landed on the runway or took off, where if you weren't careful, she would swing. The best part was we got independence in 1947. Before that, HAL was making, doing MROs and stuff for aircrafts. 1948, they got on to design and development. And that was the passion which was there in that generation of that point of time. 3 years later, the aircraft, first aircraft was ready and entered service thereafter. A large number of aircrafts were produced, and further developments were done in terms of Pushpak, which was a non-aerobatic aircraft, and the Aeropi aircraft, which is there, leading on to further development as far as the HPT-32 is concerned, and so on and so forth. And therefore, right in the beginning, we had gone into design and development. A little unknown fact here, but let me just raise it up for you all, is the fact that we also exported this aircraft. We exported it to Ghana, 12 aircraft. And it stayed there for a certain amount of time till it was sort of de-inducted. And there were issues there from which we can draw lessons in terms of product support and stuff like that. And those were early years. The next development and a major project that was taken up was the the Marut HF-24. 1957, 10 years after independence, when the country decided, based on an IAF ASR, that we must get a supersonic fighter. And they looked around, they looked at HAL, and they realized that the capability doesn't exist. So they called Dr. Kurt Tank, engineer from Germany. He came with his team here, and then worked on the aircraft. And in 4 years, the first prototype was up. It got inducted. And there was an issue there. The issue was that while the aircraft got made, a lovely airframe, supersonic, meant to be, the engine was underpowered. And as a result of that, if you have underpowered engine when you're up in the air, obviously you can't perform to the standards that you want the aircraft to do. As a service, the kind of angst that you will have then is that you wanted so much out of it and you don't get it. I can well imagine the kind of debate that must have transpired at that point in time. And of course, the fact that HAL was still sort of, aerospace industry was still sort of settling down. Issues of product support and so on and so forth. But one point I want to, highlight here is that any initial aircraft has issues of development. I mean, the first version of the aircraft is never perfect. It's only when the aircraft is nearing de-induction is when you actually see an aircraft that is far more sort of stable and sensible. But the lesson that I want, another few lessons that I want to take out from here is that what should have happened? It got de-inducted pretty early. By the 71 war, we had 2 squadrons. They performed well. Before that, we had got the MiG-21's license production in, and that is going on. And when you compare the MiG-21 to the Marut, there are issues there in terms of underpowered and stuff. What should have been done? And remember that we were getting into license production. License production we've been doing earlier. The Harvard, for example. So we were into that. We had learned about production. And then we ran into an aircraft which is indigenously designed in India, but of course by Germans. Team led by Dr. Tank. And should we have continued? Should we not have continued? The aircraft was withdrawn from service after 13 years. A lot of 180 plus aircrafts were made. A lot never really entered service. They never really flew as much as they should. Quite obviously, the players who were involved, the Indian Air Force, the government, and the HAL, decided to call it a day. In between, there was an engine available with more power. Bristol wanted the Orpheus Bristol. They wanted development, money for that, £5 million. Not much, but for a poor country, I guess a bit more. The government didn't agree to that. So therefore, you had a lovely airframe all the way along with the underpart engine, and after 13 years, it was dropped in service. Now, why I'm giving the examples is, we come back later when the LCA program started, somewhere around the mid 80s, when the LCA came up. And remember that when capability to design and develop is something which is built over time. It's not something that you can. And remember, Marut, I explained that it started off by this German team that had done. We started with the LCA. Again, a lovely project. HAL said they couldn't take it on. DRDO said yes. And therefore, under ADA is where LCA got the project started off. And all of us remember the angst that was there, the timeline that it took, the amount of effort that went into develop all these peripheral competencies that are required to make the aircraft. And I remember attending so many meetings where, it almost appeared that if one was not careful, the project would stall. The good part in this project was that the three players stuck to their guns. And despite so many occasions where, one could have called it a day, we see the aircraft having got inducted into service. And it is a lovely aircraft. I was very happy the other day to read in the papers that 5 aircrafts are now going to UK for the exercise which is going to be held. So the lesson here is that one project stalled. It had deficiencies when the players backed off. And there was another occasion where the same thing could have happened. But it was the people coming together where we found that the aircraft moved on, overcame a large number of their problems, entered service. Is that aircraft going to be the ultimate aircraft, the one that is there in the squadron? No. It is the first lot of aircrafts. There are going to be various variants after that. They're going to be LCA Mark II and so on and so forth. And they're going to be improved design and development issues of improvements taking place. And therefore, the fact will lie. But the focus on looking at self-reliance or having a capability within the country is extremely important. And that's the point I'm making. This debate will always continue. There's an operational situation, there's a capability shortfall. Do I get that now immediately? Or should I get capability to address that while we look at strengthening our in-house strength in the country? And that is a debate which people in service will have to tackle. But having said that, with these examples, let me move on ahead. What all happened? The fact is that around the time when the LCA was starting, the government also started off with the guided missile program and all these other things. We saw the success there. Why license production is going on? Was license production bad? The answer to that is no. License production gave us capability. It also strengthened our manufacturing base, our industrial base, but to a certain extent. And therefore, from there, you have to move on to your indigenous design and development. Along came liberalization. 10 years after Kargil is when the committee report, the group of ministers report came. And that is when we started actually seeing a re-emphasis on indigenous design and development. We saw, for example, the private sector, defense sector being opened up to the private industry. We saw FDI being allowed in. And we saw the DPP change, procurement procedures change, and get in this categorization of make. Buy global, buy and make, so on and so forth, until now, till recent DAP, where, of course, the focus is on IDDM, Indigenous Design and Development. So therefore, we've seen this change taking place. But one point I want to highlight here is that while all this was happening over time, to my mind, it is when the present government came in 2014, is when we saw the political intent becoming very strong. And I'll remind you of Aero India 2015, where the Prime Minister had come and he gave a speech where he announced for Make in India. And again, there it stalled for a certain amount of time, and then the Atmanirbhar Abhiyan started off. And what has emerged quite clearly is a political intent for self-reliance, for making things within the country, for getting that kind of capability from within. So we saw that. Recent budget itself. I'm not going to go over all these nitty-gritties of that because, you all have read about it. It's been flashed all over the papers, news, so on and so forth. And therefore, where are we now? And that is the question that stares us in the face. There is no doubt that we have a very strong industrial base. In fact, if you look at the world's largest arms-making industries, and we have Lockheed #1, and Genatomics, which is somewhere near HL. HL stands around 40. I'm forgetting the exact figure, 42 or somewhere there. So we are a pretty large. Bell stands at 66, and OEB stood around somewhere around 50. So we have a pretty large industrial base, and we have MSMEs and stuff are there, quite a bit. Are we where we want? And the answer to that is no. That means we have progressed a lot. There's no denying it. We have a large amount of inherent capability in the country. There's no denying it. But are we where we want? Do we have the kind of capability to develop the kind of equipment that we want, platform that we want in the country? The answer to that is no. So what do you do? And here are a couple of quick suggestions. The chair has scared us all by telling us it's 15 minutes. So let me just quickly flash to them. And I'll give you my viewpoint on that.
You still have 2 minutes.
So the first thing is, I said that we have the manufacturing capability. Is it as advanced as where we want it? Are we going to get the equipment platforms to the level that we want it? Level where the services are satisfied, that yes, we've got a job to do, and I have the kind of platform that we want. And the answer to that is no. While we have certainly progressed and while we certainly have a standard, we are not there yet. And therefore, what do? We've gone through the license production phase, where we've learned what is meant to be done. Could we have done more there? After that is yes. After all, from license production, we should have learned and then developed, companies within the country, which should have actually been global, making components, radars, for example, the sensors, or whatever. We haven't done that. So we have the jigs, we know the procedures, we know what is to be done, but we haven't gone to the next stage. But anyway, we know the whole procedure there. Design and development, indigenous, we've done that. We started off with the AC-2. We got a whole lot of aircraft, AJD-16 to Maru to LCA to the ALH, and so on and so forth, and so many more under production, under design and development. We are there also, but there we say that we are not where we want to be. What do we now do? And my suggestion to that is that why don't we leapfrog? I mean, if we go the design and development way, we will reach where we want to be. But technology is also moving, both in terms of manufacturing and in terms of technology itself. So what do you do? And one thing that comes to mind is, why not leapfrog? And how do you leapfrog? One could do it by code development. And again, we've been down the route there earlier. There was the FGFA project. We got to learn lessons from that. And then be very clear, what is the kind of code development program that you want to get into? And what is the kind of negotiation that you want to do? And that clarity is very important. Because unless you're very clear the technology that you want and the benefit that you want out of that, what are you going to contribute? What the other guy is going to contribute? Or the other players are going to contribute? But if you do your homework well there, you will be able to. There was an opportunity, after all the 6th-gen aircraft are being made, the Tempest program, for example, the Franco-German one, so on and so forth. Some will come. Maybe we should initiate. But that is something I think that the government needs to look at very carefully. The second point I want to say is of private industry. Private industry has great potential. Defense industry opened up to them 20 years back. But the kind of, while policy changes have taken place, the kind of effort that we want to see, or the involvement that we want to see in the private industry is not there. Both sides are waiting. The government, from its side, has given the policy sort of changes that are required there to enable them to come. And from their side, they are waiting for contracts to come. And in this bargain, what has happened is that private industry has come in there. In the MSME sector, we do see a large amount of development, largely through offsets and so on and so forth. But what about the other part? How do we get them in? And they bring great capability. But let me give you a couple of examples on how things have happened. As you look around, recently the Avro replacement contract has gone to Tata. Tata is now going to start manufacturing those aircrafts. He will get that capability, what the country was seeking for. I mean, after all, the strategic partnership project, this SP model was there and so on and so forth. So you have that there. On the army front, you have Bharat Forge coming up with this artillery gun. And on the naval side, you have L&T coming up with the OPV, which they made on time, on schedule to the to the required timelines. And therefore, we've seen the capability which exists. And therefore, we need to give it a start. But also, let me also take you to the latest happenings around on the startup issue, on the drone competition that the Air Force held. And what do we see there? A great number of these small startups come up and perform. So the potential of the private industry from the smallest to the largest is huge. Should we not encourage them? So that's another point. Defense exports. Exports bring in a lot of focus. There's one thing to cater to the Indian market. There's another to compete globally, get a product selected, and they have to support it to the required. We've seen our earlier examples. I've given you one of HC2. ALH example is clear to all of you. We need to do that. We have two lovely platforms, the LCA and the ALH. Both very fit for the global market. We need to give it a push. The push is not only by the company, it's the country that needs to give it a push. The government needs to step in. Government is doing it. And we are, and I hope in the short time ahead, we will see one of these, or both these aircraft sort of being exported. But that itself raises up the level of capability that exists in the country as you enter the global market. R&D, technology is the elephant in the room. It's very difficult to get, but it's not impossible. And therefore, what needs to be done there? There are a whole lot of reports. I'm not going to go into any of that. But I will just give it, in short, I'll just say, clarity has to be there in terms of what you want to do. And I will suggest a couple of things. Identify what you want. If you pick up the DAPP, it's very clearly given a whole lot of stuff is there. Identify the technology. Say, I'm going to become master in the, let's say, 10. Get a team in, a mission-oriented team there. Choose the guys very well. Don't leave it to an organization and give them a tough timeline along with adequate money. We are quite capable of producing what you want. Let me also give you two more suggestions. And one I'm going to do is bring up the issue of stakeholders, the services and stakeholders. What is the role of services in self-reliance? Is it only to demand? Is it only to say what you want? Or is it much more than that? And I will suggest to you all that the job of the services is the most critical. You start with a requirement, it doesn't end there. That's the start of that. You actually need to get all the people together, you need to get the industry together, you need to get the government together, and you got to work as a team. And in fact, I would suggest the services need to drive the whole issue so that we are able to achieve what we want. And finally, whatever policies that you may have, at the end of the day, it is organizations which implement it. And there are a lot of reports on the fact that organizations changes are required, both in the DRDO and the ministry. I would suggest that that it is something that shouldn't be overlooked. The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of HRD is a different nomenclature, but had a change in the way things are approached. And therefore, while this is my last point that I'm putting forward to you all, if I was to implement it, I would start with that. Where you change the organization, you'll find the trickle-down effect all the way down. Thank you so very much. The chair is giving dirty looks. We've been clinking all along. But thank you so very much. I hope my points have come across and look forward to your questions. Thank you.